Welcome to Whispers Before Sleep. Let the day end quietly here, in the soft space between thought and dream. Tonight, a story unfolds, not one told aloud in the village, but one carried by rain and leaves and memory. If you find peace in this place, remember to return. Some stories need time to open. They say there is a tree, older than anything that moves, hidden deep beyond all known paths. It doesn't bloom or shed. It listens. Its roots run through forgotten dreams. Its branches reach beyond the sky. Some say it stands where the stars once touched the earth. They call it the Tree of Answers. Only a few have heard its voice. Fewer still have seen it. But it is always waiting. Liora did not grow up with tales like this. There was no one to tell them. She was found on a morning just like any other. Fog pressed against the trees, the fields wet with dew. A small child curled at the edge of the forest, asleep on a bed of moss. No name, no family, no history, only the forest behind her and the silence that held her like a cradle. The villagers gave her a name, Liora, and did their best to give her a quiet life. She grew up quietly, always observing, never fully stepping into the noise of others. She liked the edge of things. The last row of trees, the path before it darkened. She listened more than she spoke. There was something in the way she moved, like she already knew how the wind would turn. But even in her silence, there was something more. Something waiting. At night, while others slept soundly, Leora's sleep was never still. Sometimes, just as she crossed into dreaming, she felt it. A presence, not frightening, not familiar either, like a whisper threading through her thoughts. No words, just a pull, like something was trying to reach her from far beyond the waking world. It didn't come every night, but when it did, it stayed just long enough to leave her with a question she could never ask aloud. Over time, she began to wait for it. Not with fear, with longing. One night, the voice changed. It didn't drift like fog. It became clear, and for the first time, it showed her something. She was standing in a vast emptiness. No wind, no horizon. Then, a single star fell. Not fast, slow and deliberate. Where it touched the ground, the earth did not burn. It bloomed. A tree rose from the point of light, towering, silent, alive. Then came the map. It appeared in her hands, not drawn in ink, but in flickers of starlight. The lines bent in impossible directions. Symbols curled along the edges, shapes that felt ancient, older than speech. As she watched, the glow dimmed, and the map became paper again. She woke up, certain it was only a dream, but there it was, lying on her desk, pale, delicate, and utterly real. The lines were still there, though faint. She touched one with her fingertip and felt a soft thrum under the page. The air in the room seemed to shift. The map wasn't a message. It was an invitation. She didn't pack. She didn't tell anyone. She folded the map once and placed it inside her coat. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the sky was still undecided, clouds stretching above like held breath. The trees were still. She hesitated only once, just before the first branch curved overhead. Then she stepped forward. The forest didn't greet her. It accepted her. She passed the last known tree, the one everyone in the village had carved their names into as children. Beyond it, the world was different. Not darker, just quieter, more aware. Behind her, the fields faded. Before her, the path waited. It had always been there, though no one could remember seeing it. They say the Tree of Answers only reveals itself to those willing to ask what others won't. Liora didn't know what question had brought her here. But the forest did. The map had faded by morning, but Liora remembered every line. She rose before the sky changed, before even the birds began to speak. Her room held the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. She stood at the threshold of her door for a long time, looking out at the barely lit fields, waiting for something, though she didn't know what. The forest loomed in the distance, unchanged, as if unaware that something had shifted. She stepped out barefoot. The grass was wet. A steady rain fell, soft and even, as though the sky itself were trying not to wake anything. She moved quietly past the garden, past the fence with the broken gate, down the narrow path that curved toward the trees. The ground held the scent of earth and rain, damp wood, distant smoke, the memory of something green. As she crossed the last hill, the trees came into view fully, not as shapes or shadows, but as watchers. Every trunk stood tall, every branch curved toward the path like an open hand. She paused. Something in the air had changed. Not colder, not warmer, just more present. She stepped into the forest. The canopy above filtered the morning light into a dull silver glow. The rain softened here, caught by layers of leaves before it touched the ground. Drops landed on her shoulders and hair like small, careful taps. Each step on the forest floor made a muffled crunch. Wet leaves, fallen twigs, the quiet snap of moss-covered bark. Somewhere ahead, an owl called once, low and clear. She couldn't see it. The path beneath her feet wasn't marked, but it was there. The way one knows where to walk in a dream. She followed it without question. Time passed. Or perhaps it didn't. The forest had its own sense of rhythm, one that didn't care for minutes or hours. The trees grew denser, taller, their trunks darker, as if stained by memory. Some leaned in close to one another. Some stood alone. None of them felt asleep. Then the fog began. Thin at first, just wisps curling along the path like stray threads, but it thickened with each step. Soon it rose to her waist, then her shoulders. The forest beyond blurred into nothing. Ahead, something began to glow. It wasn't bright. It was subtle, slow, like a pulse through water. Liora stepped forward until she could see the source. A bridge. Stone, narrow, arched over a dry creek that should have had water but didn't. It was covered in moss, slick with mist. And at its center stood something watching her. It didn't move. It didn't speak. Its shape was tall and still, draped in layers of dark fabric that didn't seem wet despite the rain. Where its face should have been, there were only two glowing eyes. Soft, round, not hostile, just aware. Liora stopped. The figure raised a single hand and pointed to the path behind her. Then it pointed forward. Then it waited. Liora didn't speak. Her breath caught, not in fear, but in uncertainty. She knew, without being told, what was required. The bridge did not ask for a toll. It asked for truth. And not any truth. A forgotten one. She searched, and then she remembered. When she was small, long before she understood words, she had heard a melody. It had come to her in dreams, woven through the sound of trees and wind and rain. She hadn't thought of it in years. But now, standing before the silent watcher, the tune returned. A lullaby. She didn't remember the words, only the sound, the rhythm of it, the way it rose and fell like breath. She sang it, quietly, just the hum, just enough. The creature did not move, but the fog around it shifted. The eyes dimmed and closed, then the bridge cleared. She crossed. The forest changed on the other side. The trees stood farther apart now, their trunks pale, as if bleached by moonlight. The ground was covered in a silver moss that didn't grow anywhere else. No birds called, no wind moved. She walked slowly. Here, sound was different. Every step felt louder. Even the rain had softened, falling now like dust. The path opened into a clearing, perfectly round, framed by trees that leaned outward, as though making space for something sacred. In the center, grass so still it looked painted. No wind, no sound. Even time, it seemed, had been asked to wait. Liora stepped into the clearing, and something called her name. Not with a voice, not aloud, but clearly, precisely. She turned. No one was there, but she felt it, just ahead. A shape in the mist, moving gently, barely formed. It looked like a person, and then it looked like her, older, standing still. The figure didn't speak, but the meaning arrived all the same. A sense of waiting, of watching, of hoping she would continue. She reached forward. The shape dissolved. A path appeared. It hadn't been there before. Liora looked back. The meadow behind her was unchanged, but something had been added. A faint ringing in her ears like the end of a bell. A low tone, echoing just under the silence. She followed the new path. It wound gently to the left, then vanished. She paused, turned right. The path reappeared. Each step brought a new uncertainty. The path was no longer fixed. It moved with her choices. Sometimes it narrowed to the width of her foot. Sometimes it split into three, and then joined again without her knowing which one she'd taken. The forest around her remained still, but small things began to change. A tree she passed blinked once. A rock beneath her foot gave a soft sigh and returned to stillness. The leaves above her seemed to sing, not loudly, not in melody, but in vibration. Something old, something only she could hear. Far ahead, a low hum rose from the ground and held steady. She followed it. And all the while, a question kept forming in her mind. Not one she could say aloud, not even one she understood. But it grew. Somewhere beneath her skin, beneath her breath, the forest was asking something, and she was beginning to answer. No markers pointed the way. No symbols on stone or wind-blown clues etched in bark. The forest simply led her. Liora walked until she could feel the change before she saw it. The path curved around a slope veiled in mist. When she reached the top, the trees opened. Not all at once, but like a breath being held, then slowly released. Below her, a glade spread out in a wide, near-perfect circle. It had no edges, just a soft blur where forest met silver grass. The air here felt closer. A quiet intensity lingered, as if the ground beneath the roots carried a rhythm. At the center of the glade stood the tree. It did not tower. It ascended. Its trunk rose not with height, but with presence. Solid, vast, smooth in some places, cracked in others, like old parchment that had been folded and unfolded over time. Light clung to its bark, not reflected, but drawn in and released in pulses, like something breathing slowly. The branches reached outward and upward, not wild, not orderly, but as if remembering something far above. Each one stretched into the sky like threads pulled from constellations, curving softly, spaced wide apart. Between them, leaves drifted in stillness, shimmering not with color, but with shifting textures, as though each one held a dream being reflected back to the world. There were no fruits, no flowers, no scent, only presence. Liora stepped into the glade. Her breath shortened, not from fear, but reverence. The tree didn't speak, it watched, not with eyes, With memory, she moved closer. Around the base of the tree, the grass changed color. Silver turned to pale blue, then to the faint gold of sunrise, though the moon still hung full above her. The bark at eye level was etched with markings. Some looked like letters, but none she knew. Others resembled symbols she had seen in the dream map, but now more complete. They pulsed, softly, like a rhythm beneath her skin. She reached out. Her fingers stopped a hair's width from the trunk. Not by force, by choice. Something told her she was already being seen. Still, she touched it. The moment her skin met the bark, the glade vanished. Not with violence, with quiet. The forest, the sky, the rain, gone. In their place, a sea of memory. She stood in a chamber with no floor, no ceiling, only moving images suspended in air. Not like dreams, not quite like thought. These were fragments. A child laughing in the arms of someone faceless. A mountain she had never climbed, but somehow remembered. A falling star she watched as a baby, but had no language to recall. An old man crying over a book she would one day read. And then, herself. Alone in a village garden at dusk, whispering to a flower no one else had noticed. Then older, walking past someone she had loved but never spoken to. Then younger, crying over a wooden toy whose name she could no longer remember. Then older still, gray-haired, hands shaking, writing in a journal beside a fire as snow fell outside. None of these lives were fixed. Some were past, some might still be coming. She wasn't certain, but the tree was. It did not tell her what was true. It showed her what could be, not as prophecy, as invitation. She let go of the trunk and stepped back. But the visions didn't stop. Not yet. The bark glowed where her fingers had touched it. A soft curve of light traced upward, connecting her hand to a set of symbols just above her eye level. They flickered, then changed. A sound, not heard but felt like breath inside the chest of the earth. Then, for the first time, she sensed it. A question. But it wasn't hers. It came from the tree. It asked without asking. What do you carry that is not yours? Liora blinked. She hadn't spoken. But the tree had heard the weight she bore. Not her sadness. Not her loneliness. Something older. Something she had never told anyone because she did not know it had a name. She placed her hand on the trunk again. This time, she did not hesitate. The light drew upward, and the memories deepened. She saw a figure, a woman, singing to her in a place of stone and shadow. Not a house, a cellar. The lullaby was the same one she had sung at the bridge, but the woman's face was not clear. Her voice was broken, not by fear, but exhaustion. She saw fire, not burning, contained. A candle lit by a man whose eyes were so tired they looked ancient, though his face was young. She saw herself, walking through a village not her own, carrying a box wrapped in cloth. Inside it, a single lock of hair tied with red thread. These visions were not linear. They were not answers. They were threads. The tree was offering her a weave, and still, it said nothing. But it knew. Liora stepped back, not in retreat, but in recognition. The tree was not a source of answers in the way people wanted. It did not speak. It revealed. And only to those willing to see. She sat at the base of the trunk. The rain had stopped. Or perhaps it continued elsewhere. Here, time had its own rhythm. She closed her eyes. And for a long time, she simply listened. The tree did not whisper. It waited. Liora remained at the base of the tree, eyes closed, heart still. The visions had stopped, but the presence of the tree lingered. It didn't pull her. It didn't speak. It simply waited. And in that waiting, something stirred. A question. Unspoken, yet clear. Why was I called here? The air thickened around her. The trees above, the silvered grass, the stillness, they all seemed to lean in. A soundless moment passed. And then, the world shifted again. At first there was nothing, just the hum of the tree, faint and steady. Then, as if the air had taken form, the ground beneath her feet faded. The silver grass became distant, replaced by a sky filled with stars, as though night itself had been pulled forward in time. A figure appeared before her, a child, not unlike her own younger self, standing under the light of a falling star. The star's trail burned brightly, streaking across the sky, a mark of something beginning. The child reached upward, arms stretched in innocence. The star, bright as a beacon, fell into their hands, and in that moment, the world held its breath. The tree spoke without words. Liora saw the unfolding path. She saw not just her own life, but the lives of those who had stood where she now sat, each with a story, each with a burden. Each one had come seeking something. And some, like her, had asked, but most, she now understood, had left with silence, forgotten, their questions buried beneath the weight of time. The child under the star did not hold the star forever. It flickered out. And the child, like many before her, was left only with the memory of what had been. And yet, something remained. Leora's gaze shifted. The images of the past melted into others. Faces, names, unspoken words. The tree showed her fragments of those who had come before her, each searching for the answers, the light, the moment of truth. But few remembered. The tree was patient. It was as if the world itself had bent to her question, holding its breath as it answered. Not in the way one might expect, not with certainty, but with a whisper, a revelation. She could hear it now, not aloud, but deep within her chest. The answers you seek are the questions you've never dared to ask. The words filled the space around her, not as sound, but as a pulse, a truth that expanded like an echo. Liora could feel the weight of it. She could see it. Every answer she had ever looked for, the ones she saw in dreams, in whispers, in hopes, had been tied to the questions she had avoided, the ones that lingered too close to the truth she wasn't yet ready to understand. The tree was telling her that it wasn't the answers she needed. It was the questions. But there was more. The tree wasn't finished. The air around her seemed to hold a secret of its own. Even silence holds a secret. The words did not demand to be understood. They simply were. It was as though Liora had always known them, had always sensed them at the edge of her awareness, like a half-remembered lullaby. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of this truth. Not in her mind, but deep inside where it changed something, where it broke open space she hadn't known was there. And still, there was more. The tree did not leave her with riddles alone. The rain remembers. The rain, which had come and gone throughout the journey, was no longer simply weather. It was something deeper, something older. It was memory. It was truth returned, hidden in each drop, each ripple, each small, unnoticed detail. And Liora understood now. The rain had not been a background. It had been the past, the forgotten, the unspoken. It had been waiting, for her. A choice unfurled before her. It was not sudden, not rushed. It appeared as a simple clarity, a decision that had been waiting for her all along. The tree's voice did not raise. It did not force her. It simply posed the question in the form of an invitation. You have seen what is possible, what could be, what was, and what could be forgotten. You have felt the weight of knowing, of seeing beyond what others will ever see. But now, I offer you a choice. Liora stood slowly, feeling the gravity of the moment. The tree's branches moved with her, not to touch, but to speak, to hold. You may return to your world with the memory of this journey, the weight of it, the knowing. You will never forget what you have learned. You will carry it with you. But it will not be easy. There will be no returning to what was. Not fully. The air stilled around her, or the word hung in the space between them. You may forget. Leave here with nothing. Live without the burden of this knowledge. Live peacefully. The choice is yours. Liora stood in the glade, her breath steady, her heart quiet. The weight of the decision pressed against her chest. The memory of the journey, the rain, the tree, the secrets whispered, the visions, the knowledge, hovered at the edge of her awareness, just beyond her fingertips. But the tree had offered more than just knowledge. It had offered peace. The question she had asked, the one that had brought her here, was no longer just about what was hidden. It was about the burden of knowing, about the cost of the answers. Liora closed her eyes once more. She knew now that the answers were never truly the point. The journey had been the point. The knowing, whether it stayed or left, whether she carried it or let it go, was hers to decide. And, for the first time, the silence that followed felt whole. Liora had made her choice. She chose to remember. The weight of the decision settled inside her, a quiet certainty, like a pebble dropped in the center of still water. It rippled outward, spreading across her heart, her mind, her very soul. And as she stood beneath the tree, the world seemed to shift. The air had a softness to it now, a warmth that had not been there before. The wind, once cold and biting, carried the faintest scent of earth and rain. It seemed to welcome her, as though acknowledging her decision to carry the truth forward, to hold the knowledge that the tree had given her. The tree did not speak again. It did not need to. Liora turned slowly, the silver glade stretching out before her, but it wasn't the same as it had been. The path behind her, the one she had come down, was clearer now, somehow more defined. The trees, which had once loomed with distant, indifferent eyes, now bowed gently, as if acknowledging her departure. They whispered in the soft rustle of leaves, sending her quiet blessings. X, the creatures that had watched her from the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, no longer seemed strange or foreign. They simply watched. Not with fear or curiosity, but with knowing. They too had witnessed something in her. Something the forest understood. As she walked, the forest seemed to breathe with her. The once mystical path now felt like home. The ground beneath her feet no longer resisted her steps. It was as though the very earth had grown accustomed to her presence. The rain, which had fallen in gentle waves before, had become a soft mist now, clinging to the branches and the moss-covered stones along the way. The night air was cool and comforting, and each breath she took felt deeper, richer, as if she had learned how to breathe for the first time. The trees swayed slightly as she moved past them, but there was no rush, no urgency. It was as though they too had learned to move with her, in sync with her every step. By the time Liora reached the edge of the forest, she had walked a path she didn't recognize, but one that felt deeply familiar. The transition from the mystical glade back into the world she knew was seamless, yet it left a sense of quiet dissonance in its wake. She stood before her home, the familiar silhouette of the cottage in the distance, but something felt different. It wasn't the house itself. It wasn't the stars above or the soft, flickering lights in the window. It was the air, the earth, the silence. It was more alive. The very air around her seemed to pulse with a new energy, an aliveness she had never noticed before. She could hear the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the world, as though every sound had become more distinct. The wind carried more than just movement. It carried something she couldn't quite name. She stepped forward, her hand touching the door. Inside, everything was just as she had left it. The same worn wood floors, the same stillness in the corners. Yet there was a subtle shift. The walls, the windows, the bookshelves, they seemed to watch her now, waiting, expecting. Her footsteps echoed lightly in the quiet house, but they didn't sound the same. They felt different. They carried more weight. And then she saw it. On her desk, where the map had once been hidden away, it now lay, open, unfolded, as though it had been waiting for her. It shimmered in the dim light of the room, the same stardust lines glowing faintly across the paper. Symbols she thought she had forgotten seemed to pulse with life, just like the tree's bark had. Leora's heart skipped a beat. The map, the same one from her dream. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the paper. It felt real. It felt like she had touched it before. But that was impossible. She had left it behind, deep in the forest. The room seemed to hold its breath. Liora sat down, staring at the map, the questions rising in her chest once again. She looked at the symbols, each one familiar but not fully understood. The map had brought her to the tree, but now it was back. Had the dream called her to the tree? She had come seeking something, and now, with the map in her hand, the question loomed larger than ever before. Was this journey truly over? Or was this just the beginning? Liora closed her eyes for a moment, letting the questions swirl through her thoughts. When she opened them again, everything had shifted. The room, the desk, the map, even the light felt like a dream. The house felt like a dream. The air was still heavy with the lingering presence of the tree, the soft pulse of its knowledge, its waiting. A realization settled in her chest. She wasn't sure where the dream had ended, and the waking world had begun. Perhaps the tree still waited. Perhaps it was only the beginning of another journey. One that had never truly ended, but had only paused. And in that pause, a truth was spoken silently. The tree still waits, in dreams or in waking, should you choose to find it. The map was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a doorway. The journey was not over. It had only just begun.